Hello everyone, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name is Lucy Bardos. I am an abstract painter, as you can see, and I'm also an author. This year I published my first ever book of poetry called I Dance Between Them, and in this video I'm going to walk you through all of the steps that I took to make that happen. If you are an aspiring poet or writer and are interested in the self-publishing process, this video might be helpful to you. Starting at the very beginning is step one, which is the composing and writing of all of the poems included in this book. I actually wrote these poems probably over a span of 5-6 years, so it took me quite a long time to gather this whole collection. And at that time, I wasn't actually thinking I was going to publish a book. I was just really inspired to write poetry. I have a background in literature and cultural studies. That's what I did in my bachelor's degree. So I was exposed to a ton of really cool and inspiring literature, and it just kind of awoke something creative in me, and I just started writing poems whenever I felt the inspiration. Even though I was exposed to quite a lot of poetry, some of the books that inspired me the most to write my own poems were actually not poetry books. I have one of them here that I wanted to show you as just a book recommendation. I actually recommended this book in my permaculture books video, but I think that if you want to be inspired to write nature-themed poetry, this book is really great. It's called Landmarks by Robert Macfarlane. He's a UK-based author, and the way that he describes landscapes in this book is absolutely beautiful and very poetry-esque, and so that's what inspired me to write a lot of my nature-themed poems. Just a little recommendation. So what I did was I had a document on my computer, and anytime that I wanted to add a new poem, I would either write it in there or I would write it in a notebook and then add it to the document later. When I had a quite beefy collection of poems that I liked, I kind of wanted to see what were some of the similar threads that were appearing throughout my poetry collection. And I went through different phases of grouping them in different ways. Over time, I found that there's kind of two main threads. So the poems were eventually grouped into two main groups. One of them is about how humans relate to nature, and the other one is about the broad theme of transcendence, or understanding kind of what's beyond our conscious ability to perceive reality. I'm someone who's really interested in the spiritual world, and it's really hard for me to describe those in normal language, but somehow when I'm writing poetry, it flows much better. So those are kind of the two groupings that my poems fell into. Next is the stage of deciding to get them published. Taking that step and saying, hey, I like my work enough to research and figure out this next step of turning my poetry collection into a book. When I made this decision, I realized that the next necessary step was the peer review process. That step I cannot recommend enough, because I think that is what turned my book from something that was very amateur into something more professional. And so what I did was reach out to a group, I think of about 7 to 10 people, all of whom were interested in writing and were very kind and supportive people. And I shared my working manuscript with them. I understand this is a very vulnerable spot to be in, and sometimes when we get critical feedback, it can be a little bit hard to digest and kind of discouraging, but I mentally prepared myself for that, and I said that, critique is great, and especially with poetry, it's such a subjective art form that you could really take people's feedback with a grain of salt. If they don't particularly like something, that's not necessarily any kind of comment about your work, but I think where people can offer really valuable perspectives is to see if the messaging or ideas you're trying to get across are actually getting across, or if things are just too abstract. And I got really great feedback on things like word choice and rhythm, and mostly small tweaks that I could make that would actually create a really big and positive impact into making my poetry more impactful for people. So I'm really happy and grateful to the people that provided that feedback to me. I didn't receive any mean comments, and there were pieces of feedback that I integrated happily and other pieces of feedback that I decided not to integrate. At that point, the next step before publishing, I would say, is the final read-through process. So this is once you've received your peer feedback and you just need to do that final polishing step of finding any spelling mistakes or small errors and kind of creating that polished feel in your book. So what I did was I actually, between the stages of peer review and polishing, I took a break of about 5 years, because when I was done the peer review process, I kind of got really impatient and just started sending my manuscript out to publishers. And I think I sent it to like a handful, 5 to 7 maybe. Some of them never wrote back to me, and others said that they would not be moving forward with publishing my book. As you can imagine, this was pretty discouraging, and I kind of just put my book away and just never looked at that file on my computer for about 5 years, until a friend of mine decided to self-publish a children's book, and he kind of inspired me to look at the project again. And then I realized that I had not really done that polishing phase, and I also realized that I didn't really feel at the time that I wanted to put my manuscript in the hands of a publisher and feel discouraged again. And I also decided that if I read my book that I hadn't looked at in 5 years and still liked it, I would take the steps to self-publish it myself, just to get it out there. No expectations, not trying to make a ton of money, but just to have the project out there to share with people who might be interested in it. So I did. I picked up the manuscript again, reread it, and decided I still really liked it, but I did notice there was quite a few tweakments that I wanted to make. So I did that polishing process where you kind of read the manuscript, make small adjustments, don't look at it for a couple of days, come back to it, and do that process again and again and again. This can be quite tedious, and it was probably my least favorite part of the whole publishing process, but I would say it took maybe about 5 or 6 read-throughs to get to a point where I didn't want to make any additional changes in terms of like wording. I wasn't noticing any errors. And then I needed one last additional pair of eyes to look at it for me, because often when you're rereading your own work, you do not see your own mistakes. So what I did is I had my husband read the book and see if he noticed any final little errors, and I think there were a couple, so we tweaked those, and then I was ready for the next step. The next step is formatting your book for publishing. So this can look different depending on what avenue you're taking in terms of self-publishing your book, and this video really only relates to self-publishing, so if you're working with a publisher, this process would be quite different. But for me, I initially decided that I wanted to work with a pretty well-known self-publishing platform. And I spent about a month looking into this and researching it. And what they did is they offered a lot of information on how to properly format your book. And they give you all the specifications based on the book size that you want. So my book size is 6 by 9 inches, I believe. And based on the number of poems that I had and the length, that just seemed like a good size. You can research what common book sizes are. So I was able to format my whole book. The whole interior of my book, I just did in Pages, which is like Word for Macs. I didn't use any additional software. I was able to make all of the margins and the bleed lines and everything specific to what they told me in a document. And I didn't need any additional software. So that was something I was worried about, and I didn't need to be worried about. I also was able to design my own cover, my front and back cover. I initially, again, was really intimidated, and I got this document saying it had to have, this margin and this size for different things. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. So I asked my sister, who knows about graphic design, to do it. But eventually I realized that I could just upload the template into Canva, which is a free graphic design software. There's also a paid version if you want more features. And I was able to do it myself in the end, not being a graphic designer. Designing the cover art, in case you're wondering, what I did was I took a photograph of myself. I had a photograph of myself when I was like 16 in high school, and I just traced it, and I brought that tracing into Canva, and I was able to like take off the background and everything and then integrate it into my cover. And so that was so fun. Like, as an artist, I thought that the cover design process was really fun, but you can make it as simple or as complex as you want to. About a month into the process of working with this self-publishing company, I was at the stage where I had uploaded my documents and I got a test book sent to me and realized that the printing quality was extremely poor. Like, it literally on the cover had lines, like printer lines, that made it look super cheap. So I contacted the customer service and asked them what could be behind this mistake, and they were not able to give me an answer. They just sent me another book, and it was actually really frustrating dealing with this customer service. It just wasn't in me to put something that obviously looked really, really cheaply made out into the world. Even though I didn't want to, initially I decided to publish my book with Amazon KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. I'm not the hugest fan of Amazon, as I'm sure many of you are not, but Amazon actually makes it really simple and user-friendly for people to self-publish their book. So very similarly to that other self-publishing website, they gave me the specifications for how I needed to format everything, which was slightly different than the other website. And I tweaked my my cover to match their specific specifications. And then I uploaded my documents. And at that stage, Amazon Kindle asks you to answer a bunch of questions, to provide a description for your book that will appear on the sales page, to set the price for your book. I did some research on this and looked at what other small poetry collections were selling for. It also makes it really easy for you to understand how much royalties you're going to be making based off of the sale price that you add. So I set my sale price for this one at $14 Canadian, and that actually gives me a pretty good commission compared to the other website that I was trying before. And another thing that Amazon KDP will ask you to do is to actually link your bank account so that whenever you do sell copies of your book, the money can just go straight to your bank account. I think every time you sell books in a given month, 60 days later, you receive the royalties payment directly into your bank. So they honestly make it really easy for you to publish your book. And then you can select different Amazons that you want your book to be available in. For me, I was able to select Canada, which is where I live, USA, UK, Spain, Germany, Australia, and several other Amazon marketplaces where my book would automatically become available. I'm also currently exploring the enhanced distribution feature of Amazon, and this is for if bookstores want to order your book, they're able to receive it at a wholesale price, because obviously they wouldn't want to pay the full price for each copy of the book, because that way they wouldn't be able to make any profit off of the sale. So I'm at that stage right now where I'm just enabling that feature, and once it's enabled, I'm going to start approaching a few bookstores that do support independent local authors to see if they might like to carry a few copies of my book. So that is the next step once this is complete for me. So I'm still very much in the process, like in those final stages of the self-publishing process, but just knowing that my book is kind of out there and available for people is really, really awesome. If you feel inspired to publish a book, I would highly recommend doing this. It was a really rewarding experience for me. I also went into it having no expectations of like becoming a famous author or anything like that, or making tons of money off of it. And I think that put a lot less pressure on me. So when some people in my community started picking up copies of my book, it honestly was so rewarding. Like getting that first little royalties payment just is like so heartwarming to see that people are supporting you, and you know that all of your efforts have come to fruition and you're getting a little something back. I also wanted to say at this point, you might be wondering why I'm sitting with these paintings behind me. Well, I'm actually working on a project right now which is creating a series of paintings inspired by the poems in my book. Because I'm a painter and a writer, I had the idea to kind of fuse these two mediums together in a way and to visually represent some of the poems in my book through abstract painting. So on my website, which I also created during this last phase of the publishing process a few months ago, lucybardos.com, I have a link to my book as well as to prints of the paintings that correspond to some of the to some of the poems in the book. And if you're interested in that book, paintings, or both, you can find them on my website. If you've gotten this far in the video, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sticking around. I hope this was helpful. If you have any tips or ideas for someone who's at this stage of the self-publishing process, feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear from other authors who went through this and learn about their experiences, because I think it makes it feel less lonely and more of a community. So please don't be shy to write a comment below. Thank you again for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.